So, you might have noticed that poi spinners and flow artists have a little bit of an addiction. No, not to that, or that. We have an addiction to jargon. There are a whole bunch of really specific terms that we adopt to describe what we do, but that also tend to make most of what we say sound like Greek to people that aren't in on it. So today, I'm decoding 10 of the most commonly used terms I hear in poi spinning and the flow arts. I'm looking them up so you don't have to. Drex here from DrexFactor.com, teaching you poi spinning and flow arts to benefit your body and brain, and today I'm drilling into some flow jargon to hopefully make some of the things that we say seem a little bit less confusing. Before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Dark Monk, Flow Toys, Pyroterra Light Toys, LMF Props, Spinballs, and Ultrapoi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all of these companies and how they support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links that I've got down in the description of this video. So I had a moment midway through my recent tutorial series during the quarantine that jumped out to me as just a little bit odd. You see, I was sharing a tutorial that I'd created on social media, and in describing the trick that I was teaching and why it was important, I realized that I had to rely on a lot of jargon that would only make sense to somebody who was already familiar with poi spinning. For someone who was just starting to spin poi, or someone who'd never done so before, my description would sound like absolute gibberish. So I figured it couldn't hurt to do a video where I break down some of the most common terms I hear in the poi spinning and flow arts world to help people navigate some of our jargon. Some of these terms describe concepts or frameworks, and others are just subculture-specific jargon that I figure flow-curious people might need to have explained to them. And real quick, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share so that other people can find this video, and so that you can catch it when I post a new one. So, here's my list of the top 10 poi spinning terms decoded. Let's dive in. Planes. You don't get very far into the poi world without the word planes coming up. In fact, I'd be shocked if you can even get through one lesson without hearing the term. So planes are a term that we've borrowed from the math world. Basically, when an object rotates around another object in space, the area it traces defines a plane. This means that as we spin the poi, we're basically using the movement of the head and tether over time to kind of insinuate the existence of this flat surface that the poi is spinning along. The most common planes we use are wall plane, which runs parallel to the line between our shoulders and acts like kind of a wall in front of us. In anatomical terms, this is the same thing as coronal plane. And wheel plane, which runs in parallel tracks along our sides like a pair of wagon wheels. In anatomical terms, this is the same thing as sagittal plane. To a lesser extent, we also use horizontal or floor plane, which runs parallel to the ground and is analog to transverse plane. Timing and direction. Now there's a whole video coming up next week on this topic, but the short version is that timing and direction refers to a system by which we classify the movements of two objects as they both orbit around a third object. Timing in this case refers to the phasing of those two objects. We tend to focus on cases in which the two objects are either phased together or phased apart. There are technically an infinite number of phasings, but we focus on just these two because they're the easiest to tell apart, and they lead to the most aesthetically pleasing results. Direction just refers to whether those two objects are traveling in the same direction or opposite directions. There's really only the two options here. So, when we refer to timing and direction, we're talking about which combination of these two variables is at play in what we're doing with the poi and our hands. We recognize 4 primary combinations of these variables currently. When the poi move in phase, both orbiting in the same way, we refer to it as together time, same direction. When the poi move in phase orbiting in opposite ways, we refer to it as together time, opposite direction. When the poi move out of phase orbiting the same way, we refer to it as split time, same direction. And when the poi move out of phase orbiting in opposite ways, we refer to it as split time, opposite direction. Seems like a bit of a mouthful, right? Well, next week I've got a video coming out that will talk about the different approaches to talking about this concept in depth and hopefully clarify and simplify some things. Be on the lookout for that. Antispin and Inspin. Antispin and inspin both refer to situations we find ourselves in when both our hand and our poi are moving in a circular fashion, or as it's more frequently called, flowers. Basically, you have a question here when the hand is moving around your shoulder as to whether the poi is spinning in the same direction or the opposite direction as the hand. When the hand and poi spin in the same direction and the poi is completing more beats than the hand is, the result is what we would call an inspin flower. these tend to have broad and gently curved flower petals. If, on the other hand, the poi and hand are spinning in opposite directions and the poi is completing more beats than the hand, we would consider it an antispin flower. These tend to have sharper, more narrow flower petals. As a general rule, antispin is considered to be just slightly more challenging and usually more aesthetically pleasing than inspin. A common way to jokingly challenge somebody who's just figured out a new trick is to tell them to anti-spin it. Anti-spin also just has kind of a distinctive ring to it. Unlike nearly every other term in the poi world, it hasn't been borrowed or used as a metaphor from some other pre-existing vocabulary. As such, it's kind of become a term that poi spinners have come to own as a cultural signifier. It'll pop up in odd places, and really it's just used as jargon to signal socially to other people that you're hip to poi spinning culture. Flow. I'm gonna get myself in trouble on this one, but that's okay. When we dance or move with the prop, it's not all that unusual for us to explore those movements through improvisation or as part of a meditative ritual. The idea here is to let your mind go blank and try to open a direct conduit between inspiration and action. Lots of people will say that they want to get their flow on or that they want to go flow it out. The term is also applied to performances in which a poi spinner seems to have deeply integrated their tricks and transitions into muscle memory, creating really beautiful and satisfying movements that seem to flow directly into one another. So we use the term both to describe the act of flowing as well as an adjective to label performances that seem to flow really well. We get the term from Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, a Hungarian psychologist who explored the concept of flow as it pertains to productivity and creative expression in a variety of different arts. It was his way of describing the feeling of being in the zone. So why might this get me into trouble? Well, the short answer is because the term flow also frequently functions as a bit of a Rorschach test. It's not uncommon for people to come up with their own unique definition for the term that fits their own approach to their practice as well as philosophy on spinning. Because of that, flow is frequently discussed in such a way that you wind up with as many definitions of it as there are people in the discussion. In fact, I'd be willing to wager a pretty hefty sum that at least half of the comments on this video will be people putting forth their own definitions of the word flow. Let's see if I'm right on this one. And that leads us right into talking about flow arts. Thanks to this emphasis on flow in the spinning world, we sometimes label the practice of spinning with a prop flow arts as an umbrella term to describe the underlying philosophy and practices involved in our particular form of prop manipulation. It is worth noting, though, that flow is a trait that many arts and other activities have in common with us. But so far as I know, the flow arts are the only activity in which achieving a flow state is the intended goal, rather than a practice that serves the intended goal. Some examples of props that are commonly thought to fall under the flow arts umbrella include poi, hoop, fans, and staff. There are also movement disciplines that are primarily a part of other arts, such as circus or martial arts, but practiced in ways that could also fall under the flow arts banner, such as aerial silks, rope dart, meteor, and nunchucks. In addition, there are props frequently used in the EDM scene that are sometimes labeled as falling under the flow arts, but have slightly different cultural cues, such as orbits and gloving. Flow arts is still a bit of an amorphous term, and because it's so new, we're still defining what it does and does not fit under, as well as what are the values and philosophies behind it. For more information on flow arts and the culture around it, I recommend checking out my Flow Arts 101 video series that I'll link to down in the description. Tech or tech poi. And another one that's likely to get me into trouble. Yay! Sometimes seen as the opposite of flow, tech is the practice of seeking virtuosity or intellectual rigor for its own sake in poi tricks. This frequently takes the form of parameterizing a variety of poi tricks, both to achieve a deeper understanding of how they relate to each other, as well as to identify related tricks that have yet to be practiced or performed. It also frequently has a competitive aspect to it, wherein tech poi spinners will try to engage in friendly competitions to outdo each other in skill, diversity, or comprehension of different poi tricks. Tech poi tends to attract people who are interested in math or science, as well as people that want to challenge themselves to identify common patterns and characteristics between different tricks. Pretty much everything you have ever and will ever learn with poi started out as tech, and over time has become more common and integrated into the poi vocabulary. There's a false dichotomy that is sometimes drawn between tech and flow, a debate that I frequently find really frustrating because it creates artificial barriers in how people approach the art. For a video essay in which I drill through my thoughts on this debate, I'll post a link down in the description. Hybrids. Speaking of tech poi, in simplest terms, hybrids are poi tricks that are essentially made by having each hand execute a completely different trick, and yet producing a result that is greater than the sum of its parts. Originally, the term referred to a curiosity discovered by a poi and meteor spinner named Andy House. He found that he could spin a meteor and make one end perform a poi trick called an isolation, and the other end perform a poi trick called an extension. Which was super weird because not only were two ends of the same prop performing completely different tricks, but the ends were also doing it in split time same direction, while the hands attached to the props were in together time same direction. Tricks that exhibited both characteristics had never been seen before. Since then, the term has come to apply to a diverse range of poi tricks that use a naming convention derived from their components. So, for example, Andy House's original hybrid would be isolation versus extension, or extension versus isolation. There's no preference given to which term comes first. I have done a very long video explaining the term, its origins, and the enormous variety of tricks it describes that I'll link to down in the description. For a trick that was so revolutionary at the time, hybrids have now become integral to every poi spinner's journey and absolutely ubiquitous. Flow me. This is a portmanteau used to describe friends that you have in the flowarts world. You take the word flow, stick it together with homie, and you get flow me. There's definitely a community element to this word in that the practice of spinning and thinking about props brings people together in ways that they might not otherwise. You'll connect with people you might never have met and find that you'll have more in common than you would possibly believe. Plus which, you'll find something in common that transcends language, national boundaries, and a host of other traditional barriers to exchange. Finding flomies is awesome. Muggle. So this term has something of a checkered past, not the least of which because it comes from an increasingly problematic source. Flowarts, like many other subcultures, will refer to people outside of said subculture as Muggles, after the term popularized for non-magical types in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. And this is one of those things that we don't always use in a terribly kind fashion. Like, there's definitely a slightly pejorative connotation to it a lot of the time, as though being a flow artist somehow makes us cooler or more enlightened than Muggles. Given J.K. Rowling's penchant for making statements that seem bizarrely at odds with many of the themes in her own books, this one may drop in popularity over time. At the same time, it does serve somewhat of a useful purpose in being an easy point of reference for talking about people for whom many of the words on this list may make no sense at all. I have mixed feelings about the use of this word myself. Would you like me to do a video explaining why? Let me know, down in the comments. Spin Jam. The basic social unit of the flow arts. Spin jams are get-togethers where several flomies get together to hang out and spin some props. Usually there will be some music and sometimes people will also teach at them. Spin jams are important because they tend to be a gateway that people connect to the community through. This is usually how we connect with like-minded individuals, learn the basics of a given prop, and get introduced to the cultural norms of the flow arts. Some spin jams also feature fire spinning. These are sometimes called fire jams instead of spin jams, but essentially the idea is the same. People get together to share their love of spinning. There just happens to be an area available where people can spin fire if they want to. Back when I first started learning to spin poi, one of those things that made it stick for me was connecting with people at the Confluence Park Spin Jam every Sunday in Denver, Colorado. Sadly, that spin jam no longer meets regularly, but it had a huge influence in my interest in spinning, as well as allowed me to connect with people that helped me a lot in the early part of my flow journey. See if you can find a spin jam in your neck of the woods. Community is a powerful thing. So that was my list of 10 poi spinning terms that you might want decoded. As I was brainstorming for this, I came up with a lot of terms that did not make the list. Maybe a second video is in order? Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see that and what terms I didn't cover here that you'd like to see me explain. I also just wanted to thank Taylor Glenn of Taylor Tries for suggesting this video. I've included a link to her channel down in the description so you can check her work out for yourself. It's really good. And a huge thank you to all of my wonderful supporters on Patreon. They are the reason that this video and all the videos on my channel exist. The support I get through Patreon is what makes it possible for me to be able to make poi and flow arts videos full-time. It's allowed me to turn my spinning into a full-time job, so I really appreciate everyone who has signed up to support me. And if you're enjoying the videos that I create and you have the means, and I totally understand if you don't, but if you do, consider signing up to support this channel over at patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi. You can get early access to all of my content as well as a say in what topics I tackle in the future. This here video was actually a subject that my supporters voted on. please and thank you in advance. Tomorrow I've got a real special video coming your way that I hope you enjoy. I just wanted to thank you all so much for watching and supporting the channel. Have a good one, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Peace.